Okay, now that we have better direction from the federal education department and no additional waivers are going to be requested and no extra power or request for Congress to make adjustments to the IDEA or 504, now that we know that, we can use that knowledge and now have a better understanding of what happened in March when most of the country shut down or closed its schools. Um, this is going to vary wildly throughout the country, so you're going to need to pay attention. In Alabama, for example, and in New Mexico, for example, Texas, in most of the places where we represent clients, it's a very similar pattern. Okay, we had a few weeks that the schools were closed, and it wasn't until the end of March where the decision was made that the school buildings themselves would remain closed, but school would proceed, but proceed under a distant learning format. And then, of course, nobody knew what distant learning meant. And then when it came to special education, you had the words out there with regards to distant learning, good faith efforts, um, those kind of things. Well, now we're still back to distant learning. We still have the terminology good faith efforts, but now we know no additional waivers are going to be requested or, according to DeVos, needed. All right. Our children are still entitled to a free and appropriate public education, even under a distant learning model. And so at that point, it's still accurate what I had said back in March. If you go back and look at those videos, where you're weighing the distant learning plan and you're separating it from the traditional part of the school year, which of course we were 3/4 of the way done when all this happened. So we had 3 to 9 weeks under our belt already before this occurred, which means that the analysis with regards to the distant learning is more applicable to that good faith analysis, and we'll get into that. But you still apply the traditional analysis to the start of the school year until March, which is 3 9-week periods. Okay, so you're still entitled to a free and appropriate public education, even under this new, or under our understanding now of what DeVos isn't going to do, which many schools thought she was going to do or was hoping that she was going to do, and that's provide some kind of carte blanche forgiveness for this time period, which she did not. Creates a rather big conundrum for many schools in this country that, well, it's gonna vary wildly, and we'll get it. I guess I'll get into that, guys. I am going to get into that because I'm going to talk about what baselines you're going to need in order to establish where your child is when your child returns. Okay, a lot of that's going to have to be done by you because right now you're your child's teacher in large part. Okay, which means you got to sort of understand where your child was when your child left the school, and as far as when the shutdown occurred, what happened during this period of the shutdown, and then where your child is performing when they return, so that you can establish a regression pattern, a loss pattern. And at that point, then we'll talk about compensatory. I may do that over a couple videos. Okay, this is video 1. So what I wanted to sit there and talk about, or what I am talking about, is this clarification from DeVos. Now we can back it up, understand how everything went. Like I said, the first couple weeks, the schools were closed. It was when the government reopened school, but did it through a distant format. That's the period that you need to look at. What is good faith effort? That's going to be up for interpretation, okay? But I can tell you that there also needs to be an individualized component to distant learning. And if they did not work with you to identify goals that your child would need to work on, it can come from your child's IEP goals from this school year, and it would be logical for that to occur. But there must be some charted path for the child during distant learning. That also needs to include specialized instruction. Okay, so all these things go into this concept of what's good faith. Now, if they're just dropping off worksheets and saying, well, text me or call me if you have any questions, because I don't know if that's going to cut good faith. I mean, I think people are nice about it, but at the same time, if there is a disparity, which in many, many cases there are disparities between what's being done for general education, because that's a little bit easier process to do through a distant learning format. And with some of our special education identified children, it's also going to be an easier format to figure out, especially those, that aren't necessarily impacted on the academic. Well, I'm not going to say that either. Let me just tell you that the chunk of kids that is going to be more complex, that I think are going to have a bigger legitimacy to corrective action, compensatory, remedial services, are going to be those who have children that are moderate to severely impacted, to where this format of distant learning just simply doesn't work for them. To where the related service aspects and how those related services carry over into the educational performance areas of academics, communication, and social emotional development. And the fact that many of these related services aren't being done, let's say through teletherapy, when we have businesses that do teletherapy, there's the capability to do teletherapy. And if the school district has pathologists, occupational therapists, people of that nature, that if there are companies that can do that, and it's shown that it can be effective and successful, and many of these models are shown that it can, then schools are going to be hard pressed to be able to show an excuse as to why they didn't provide it. Okay, this is going to be the end of part one, is sort of explaining where we are in that process. And then the next one, I'm going to get into that regression and the baselines and how you measure that, or what you would need to measure that. And then the last one, I'm going to talk about compensatory services, remedial services, and what those are.